So I wanted to thank you, Omen Tech Network, to giving me the opportunity to connect with all of you. It's kind of like bond beyond the boundaries. I can see and talk to all of you during this pandemic where we are all staying at home, dealing with our personal challenges. It is a good opportunity for us to connect with each other, share our thoughts, our knowledge, and everything. So today, I'm going to talk about quality. Quality is not about finding defects. How I come up with this title, right? Uh, During one of my conversation with my husband and my kids, right? They are doing something and I find issues. And my husband always figured that, oh, you work on QA, so you always find issues. And that struck me that, oh, people think about quality as just finding a bugs, but or finding defects, right? But for me, it's not. So that's why I come up with this title, that quality is not about finding defects. So I want to set the background. So I'm actually from QA profession. So I'm with QA engineering experience for last 15 plus years. Currently, I'm leading a QA team at Palo Alto Networks. So what is QA? What is quality, right? So when you Google it, you will find this is the dictionary meaning of quality, right? The standard of something, software or hardware, as measured against the specification and the degree of excellence, right? What does that mean? That means you have certain expectation, and you should, when you are looking at it, you should get that expected behavior or expected result as per the expectation. And I often get this question that only QA are responsible for quality. Is it? I believe that quality is everybody's responsibility, right? I believe that quality is everyone's responsibility, because developers are doing their parts by writing their unit test, right? And product owners are there to check which feature will go to this release and what is the priority and all that. So product owners are doing their part. UX designer care about user experience, right? And UI design and all that. Security tester check for vulnerabilities, right? Performance tester are taking care of all non-functional testing, for example, stress, load test, and all that. So everybody is contributing to the overall product quality, right? So in order to get a quality product, everybody need to contribute. So I don't claim that QA is the solely owner for quality. So that's the reason I felt that quality is everybody's responsibility. All of us are providing our share into the pie. So what is the role of QA? I want to give a generic idea, right? Quality assurance is defined as an activity to ensure that organization is providing the best possible product or service to customers. QA focus on improving process and deliver quality products to the customer. So we are the middleman between the development and the release, and to the end user, customer, as per se, right? So our job is to identify something is not working as per the specification, as well as to set a standard where we can understand that what is going on. If development claim that the feature is working, what is working, which extent. For example, feature wise, maybe it's working, but for QA, our responsibility of the verifying is that that feature is working, as well as when we integrate with other part of the product, it also should work, right? So the handshake between the other component is also working, and we are trying to figure out the boundary cases or rare instance or negative test cases for that instance, right? So what QA do day to day, right? So we understand the product. In order to be a good QA, we have to understand the technical architecture, right? How is each of the pieces are glued together, basically. So specifically how data is flowing, right? What customer is seeing in UI, as well as how it is visible to UI, how backend is working. So how all these pieces are connected together. Understanding technical architecture will give us that view, right? And then definitely validate the functional specification. We have to do the functional testing, right? And then identify defects is one of the tasks for sure. We have to identify if whether certain specification is met that goal or not, right? If it's not, then definitely it's a issue. So we have to raise it and we have to work with the developer to solve it, right? And automation. Nowadays, I don't see any manual test QA role at all. It's most of like combined role. So as we have to do manual QA as well as we have to do automation so that we can practice how can we catch the issue or catch the defect before our customer, right? So in order to do that, we have to invest on automation. So I want to talk about QA mindset, because QA mindset is basically to understand how holistically we have to view this. So testing is actually verifying, exploring, and automating, right? That's what makes a good testing. So a lot of other things we have to do, for example, input validation, right? So when customers or when end user are logging into our product, right, what they are going to put in that login and password field, we cannot control. But in order to be safe, we have to make sure that we are doing input validation, right? And the boundary testing. We don't know, if there is a specification for the particular feature, we have to, for example, if we have 1 to 10 range, right, we have to make sure 11 doesn't work or -1 doesn't work. So we have to do the boundary testing, and then we have to do functional testing for every feature, right? And we have to understand multi-browser testing capability, right? We have to understand if the product-wise it is capable of running in Chrome or Safari, or is it any specified that we will support only one browser or unlimited browser, right? And then backward compatibility is also our task to figure out, so that we figure out the regression testing, right? Regression issues, that if anything used to work last build, but right now it's not working, so how this product is progressing, right? We have to make sure we also be able to do the backward compatibility. And then non-functional testing like stress testing, load testing, performance testing, right? We have to think about that when we are testing a feature. So best practices for QA is, from my perspective, I see what it worked so far for me is establish efficient process, right? So we have to understand how we want to do day to day. What is our handshake, right? For example, developers are saying that they are done with their feature development, and when QA go and try to verify it, then it's not available, right? The build is not deployed, or it is in the development environment. It's not in staging. So how that handshake will happen? So we have to establish a efficient process so that we understand the handshake, we understand the expectation from QA as well as from other team. In this example, I just talk about development, but then there are a lot of other dependency. For example, the requirement, if it's not set properly or clearly, then we don't know what we should verify against. So establish an efficient process is very important for QA. And then robust testing environment, right? So we have to have a testing environment where we have very close to customer data. I'm sure it's not possible to have customer data in a testing environment, but we want to simulate our data so that we can test as close to customer environment. And then release acceptance criteria, right? What we will accept for this particular release, or the entire release process, right? Overall release process. We will, if we are not allowing any P1, P2 bugs, then we have to make sure we say it out loud and clear that we are not accepting any P1, P2 bugs in the release. And also acceptance criteria for if anything we have to accept. For example, if P2 bugs we are not fixing for XYZ reason, but we have to release because some customer is waiting for it or something, some urgent scenario, then we have to make sure we spell that out in our release note, right? So those criteria have to be acknowledged by the product team, by the development team, and by QA team, obviously. And then bug prioritization, right? How we prioritize the bug. Customer found bug should be always P1. We want to fix all the customer issue as soon as possible. But development have a lot of backlog. Maybe feature development is going and a lot of new infrastructure related issue is coming. So it's not always possible to prioritize all the customer issues as a P1. In that case, we'll figure out what is the major issue. Then there will be P1 customer found bug, which we should fix ASAP, most probably 24-hour, or depends on company to company how they set the rule, right? And then P2 and P3 we have to take care after that. But then customer bugs will be the first priority, and the internal found bug for our feature related bug or cross-functional feature related issues, right? Integration issues, those bugs have to be prioritized weekly basis to understand that it is going properly. And then definitely functional security and performance testing should be another priority to make sure all our test cases are securing our product, right? The security vulnerability scan doesn't flag anything for our particular product. And then automation is the key, right? And so more efficient process, as I was mentioning, right? Establishing an acceptance and exit criteria. Always keep your test cases up to date is another process we need to pay very good attention to. And then be on top of customer issues, as I was mentioning, and then transform your customer issues to test cases, right? So we are solving one customer issue, but as you know, if we don't test it constantly, we don't cover that in our test cases, then it will show up in different customers. So we have to have a grip on that and make sure we transform our customer issues to test cases. And then story, task, and bug relationship. We have to, so every story will have multiple tasks, and multiple tasks might introduce multiple bugs, right? And if we don't link to task and bug, if there is no relationship, everything will be lost, right? After 6 months, we don't know which feature we are filing bug about, right? So we have to create the process of bug and story relationship. It could be through component, could be through relates to, or however people are, whatever software people are using, right? I'm using solely Jira. So Jira have very good coverage with that relationship. So I'm using that. And templatize everyday task. For example, bug filing, right? Every QA will file differently. So if we have a template, right, which each QA engineer can follow, then whoever filing a bug in your team, it will look like the same, right? Because we are following the template. Same goes to test case writing and status update and all that, right? And as I was mentioning, a robust testing environment, we should always shoot for 3 different environment, right? Developer environment, where developer are doing the development work, and staging environment where QA is testing solely. And after QA sign off the staging environment, then it goes to pre-production, which might have more of white label customer data, and check the production, product there. And after we are satisfied, QA give a green light, then we can go to the production, right? And then on-demand test environment deployment is another important thing for QA environment, right? Because, for example, once we release a product, customer will not file the bug in that latest release, right? So customer will find maybe 10 build earlier or something like that, right? So we have to have the ability to deploy on demand in the test environment. Most of the company already have it, but if it's not there, it's time to get that robust testing environment ready, right? And make sure your testing environment is under CI/CD pipeline, right? So yeah, you don't have to go through manual steps to deploy a new build or old build, so that you don't waste a lot of time. If you are doing that, then we should put some investment, some understanding of how quickly you can make it under CI/CD process, so that your test team will be much more efficient, right? QA should always test on staging with real near real-time data, as I was mentioning, right? Most of the company cannot have, it's a confidential customer data we cannot have in the testing environment, staging environment. So we should have near real-time or near customer data. Release acceptance criteria, as I was mentioning, P1, P2 bugs should be taken care for release, and only testable features should be delivered, right? We don't want to deliver a part of big feature, right? So if we don't know how to test it, then it can create a lot more regression down the line, right? And then known issues should be on a release note. As I was mentioning, right? For example, one of the P2 bug, we cannot fix it because of the time crunch or backlog or the tech dev or whatever the reason is, right? We have to put those P1, P2 issues. If we didn't fix it, we have to put it on release note. Tech dev should be taken care frequently. So most of the time we put a lot of things on hold because we are working on release, feature release, right? For example, I need to write a documentation on how to set up this environment, and I know that it's a essential things to do. But since I'm busy, my release is on Friday, I don't have time, so I'll just put that task and go with the release, right? Excuse me. So after that, I might forget, right? So I have to keep track of what are the technical depth I have. So documentation is one of the thing. Automation is always the other thing that we always put out because we don't have time. But we always have to take care of this thing whenever we have some time. For example, if we release every 2 weeks, then keep a week worth of time so that we can go over our tech dev, we can go over whatever pending task we have, right? A new feature should not introduce regression. That's the one of the thing we always have to take care that new feature work as per the specification, as well as the other component is not broken by this new feature. So there should be no regression defects for that. Bug prioritization, bug triaging should be a regular practice. Common understanding of what should be in P1 and what should be on P2 and so on, right? Most of the time it's P1 to P4. I have seen most of the companies. but yeah, it based on your company standard that how they are tracking the severity rate or priority. So customer found issue should be the first priority for sure. Functional security and performance testing, right? QA does most of the time functional testing, which is day-to-day activity. Security test case should be always on QA's mind, because maybe some other team, a security team, is taking care of certain things, but very minimum. At least we should cover the basic things, right? That input validation is one thing. Second thing could be the password, right? It should not be so simple password. Do we have the password restriction and all that? So this kind of security test case we should always verify and check from QA side. Performance of application, right, or production threshold should be identified as baseline and always optimized. So as of today, how my application is doing, unless we are doing performance testing, will not have that baseline, right? If we don't have baseline, how we can optimize? So this is a common practice, and QA should always think about it. That we have to do the performance testing. Maybe earlier stage in the product is not possible, but always think about future forward-looking way, and make sure have a performance test plan in the mind. And automation, right? Automation makes QA life easier, so that instead of doing the manual testing again and again for the UI or for backend, if we have the automation, that makes it easier, right? And how we decide what to automate or what not to automate. So basically, of the test cases, you're seeing that you are testing every release, then definitely we should automate that and make sure that you don't have to monitor those test cases or execute that test cases every day, right? So you can concentrate on some bigger issues and let automation take care of the all time consuming issues, test cases, right? And need to understand what to automate and when to automate, right? Sometimes we don't have time during the release, so we have to think about when we have some low time, so we can start automating. But it is good practice to do some percentage of automation every week, so that the backlog of automating stuff doesn't grow so big that you have to pay much more price on that. So I want to cover, so all that was in QA mindset I wanted to cover. So what QA every day to day do, and how should they think about testing a product, right? Now let's shift a little bit of methodology, right? So far I have worked on waterfall model and then agile. Right now I'm working on agile model, but doesn't matter which model we are working on. I hope you already know what is waterfall model. So waterfall model is basically a little bit of a lengthier process than current agile model everybody is using, right? So we have to do the requirement gathering, then we have to design technical architecture and design our product, and then development, test, deployment, and maintenance. So this whole process take quite a long time. So I can talk about my experience in Cisco. So Cisco, I saw this process take 6 months to 12 months. So our release was every 6 months, and some team were trying to cut it short. So it was like 3-month release process, right? And agile model, if you see, it's doing the similar thing, right? We are planning, we're designing, we're developing, we're testing, we're deploying, and a review. We are doing exactly the same thing, but it's much frequent, right? So for example, if you are following 2-week sprint, so in 2 weeks we are doing this, and then we are delivering that piece of product, or particular functionality of that product, and then moving forward to the same cycle, right? And so what this is doing, it's basically quick iteration of what we are doing in waterfall. But if you think about it, it's pretty much similar thing you are doing. You are just getting more faster deployment of some part of the product. We are delivering in 2 weeks. So we are continuously doing it, and so QA activity actually happened very fast in agile environment. So we see a lot more pressure of testing. For example, 10 developers are developing 10 different feature, and definitely QA and dev proportion is not always 1-to-1. It's always 3-to-1, right? So we have 3 QA, for example, and then what 10 developers are developing, we have to test those features and identify the defects and all that within a very short amount of time. If you have 2-week sprint, then maybe QA get 2 days of testing for this maybe 10 particular features. So this is just an example. It's not hard and soul rule, but that's what when we are doing that, also keeping track of automation is very important. I know that everything is going at the same time, and then we have to write the test cases as well, right? So do the manual testing, test case writing, and then test case automation. So this is little faster, but same way. And then we have different kind of architecture, right? So we have monolithic architecture, and then we have microservice architecture. All the newer company use microservice architecture, and I would say, I would not generalize it that all the old company use monolithic, but that was the trend that time. So how monolithic architecture work is basically we have UI, and then we have business logic, and then we have the backend data interface and database and all that. So testing that and testing microservice is pretty same way, but there are a lot of pros and cons. So I want to go over the microservice architecture as well. So as you see how the monolithic architecture was showing, that we have UI as well, and then we have all the microservices who is taking care of all the flows. Basically, we have the database, backend, and everything for that particular microservice. So one benefit is if one of the microservices is not working, we can we can disable that and create a new microservice to replace that, or update that microservice, and that functionality will work, right? But for monolithic, you have to basically make sure you have to apply that fix throughout the application, how it is interacting with the rest of the component, right? So as I was saying, let's go over monolithic and microservice. So hundreds of microservices have to communicate synchronously over the network, right? Making service interconnection a significant issue that doesn't affect the monolithic architecture. So the execution and load time and everything. So how they are connected, that is a ongoing challenge for microservice. And then is microservices individual, independent, right? So that it could be replaced without affecting the entire system. This gives microservice responsibility over resiliency and forces the developer to design a more robust microservice. And concurrency in microservices is handled by scaling. So, and then I want to go over a little bit of what type of testing we do, right? So we have the functional testing, as I was mentioning, and then we have the non-functional testing. So the functional testing include unit testing, integration testing, system testing, acceptance, and regression testing. And non-functional testing is basically performance testing, security testing, usability, and compatibility testing. So I wanted to go over all the generic strategy and how overall QA think. They just don't file a bug. So I hope you could see that that QA doesn't only file the bug, they have a lot of other activities. So takeaway from here is QA mindset is the key. Whether we are testing waterfall model or agile model, whether we are testing monolithic application or microservice application, whether we are doing functional testing, non-functional testing, we have a lot of things to take care, but QA mindset is the key. In order to be successful QA, you have to understand the overall holistic view of the product, not just what functionality is working or not. So that's all I have. And if you guys have any question, I can definitely answer that. I see the question, what is the difference between test cases and test script? Very good question. So test cases is basically you are capturing a scenario, right? That what you want to follow, how you want to test it. So for example, in a feature, you might have 100 test cases, right? So how end user will follow end to end. For example, you have to log in. So you have to provide your username, your password, and then click on login button, right? So that can be your one test cases. And the next test cases can be after you log in, you see the successfully next screen, right? So that could be another test case. What test script does is pretty much similar thing, but that is automation, right? So what you are testing manually, you can automate them, and that called test script, basically. Any other question anybody have? So I got another question, best framework you can suggest. So it depends on your need, your team. So first of all, you have to identify in your team what is the expertise for the team. For example, if you want to do the UI automation, right, which framework you want to use. So depending on if your team members have Java expertise, or if your team members have Python expertise, then you can use Selenium with Java or Selenium with Python based on the expertise, or JavaScript in that matter, right? You can use that. But then the learning curve is pretty low in that. But if you want to go with other behavioral driven test cases, you can use some other thing, robot framework and stuff. But from my experience, I see that Selenium is universally working for every company, whether you are testing monolithic or microservice. Selenium is very helpful for all the UI test cases, and it can go in depth. You can take care of tooltip, you can check the data inside the chart and everything. So I am supporting Selenium. But depends on your team expertise and how you are dealing with that, right? I got another question. Actually, I want to mention the automation framework as well, right? You can use TestNG or JMeter for performance testing. Just wanted to highlight that that's what we are using, and not that what I am using, you have to use the same thing, but you can identify what is the pros and cons, and then you go for your team expertise and go for that particular framework. So I get another question that tips for the QA test plan. So QA test plan is basically overall overall view of what QA is going to do, right? So if we have a release, for example, we have release in 1 week, 1 month, right? How you want to design your test plan of testing that feature 1 month away. So you have to basically understand the technical architecture, and then you have to start writing test cases, even though the development is not there yet, right? You have to read through the software specification and get the test cases and after you go through the test cases, then how long it will take for your team or you to test that, right? Estimation. And then what do you see as a potential risk, and what you see the dependency, right? If there is any cross-functional dependency, then you have to understand, we have to tell that in our test plan that, we can do this functional, non-functional testing. This is our timeline, this is our ETA, but then we have, that many test cases, but then we have dependency on this particular infrastructure or particular piece of software that, we have to get it from XYZ team. Then how we will be integrating that will be, layout in the test plan. And then, is there any other question? I think that's all the question I had. And definitely, you for the test plan also, I forgot to mention that you have to provide the bug tracking, right? Which project you are using for the bug tracking and all that. So I think that creates a good QA test plan. So if you have any other question, please feel free to connect with me in LinkedIn. I'm open to discussion if you want to discuss, if you are having some issues or something you want to understand about QA process or generic mentoring also is possible. I can be open for that. And I got another question that certification. So certification is good to have, but not always, not everybody evaluating the certificate as the same way. But definitely you want to understand the product, and you want to understand what is the current technological trend, front end and back end. So and after that you can decide you want to do the certification. It's not required in any company, but it is helpful. At least it gives some credential to you. So for hiring manager, when they are looking at your resume, that pop up, and that definitely they get interested when you have certain specific skill set, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any other question. So thank you so much for joining this session. I'm very happy to see you guys here, and definitely keep in touch. You can connect me via LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, whichever way is comfortable to you. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in any other session like this. Thank you, Anna and Omen Tech Network, to giving me this opportunity to communicate my knowledge to everyone out there. Yeah. Thanks. Bye. Take care.